The Indianapolis Colts have several massive contract decisions coming up this offseason for some of their longest tenured players. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Colts podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network around. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd of HorseshoeHuddle.com. And I'm joined, as always, by Jake Arthur, the boots on the ground for Round Table Sports. We are back today with our off-season coverage of this Indianapolis Colts team. I'm sure you guys are all enthused about it being the off-season already, yet again, for the Colts. But today we're talking about several contract discussions that need to be had in the next couple months from this Colts organization. Most notably, a receiver set to make $29 million, a linebacker who everyone's been coming for his head the last couple years, and then a couple other big contracts that just could be on the table to be reworked or redone by this Colts organization in the next few months. But Jake, the topic of the hour and kind of the inspiration for this episode is Michael Pittman Jr. Now, Michael Pittman Jr., we don't want to say a bad thing about this guy, right? Fantastic player over the course of his contract, earned his second contract he got with the Colts, and fought through so much the last couple years with his injuries and with, being able to get on the field. But so as of right now, he's set to make $29 million against the cap in 2026, which is the seventh highest in the NFL among wide receivers. And the play just hasn't shown that level of contract that he's getting. Alec Pierce surpassed him as the number one wide receiver on the depth chart. He hasn't hit 1,000 yards in 2 seasons now, or 2 or 3 seasons now, I think, with the Colts. And it's just, you can't keep him at that contract number. And with Chris Ballard returning for another year, we'll see what they do with that. But I think any smart organization, I don't know if you outright cut him. I don't know if you have to trade him. But you have to do something with that cap hit, whether it's extending, restructuring, cutting, or trading. One of those options. You just can't have him playing at $29 million this next year, especially when you need to make room for a player like Alec Pierce, who, quite frankly, has been better than him the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and kind of the inspiration for all of this is because it's a big season of free agency for the Colts. Like you mentioned, Alec Pierce, they have decisions to make on, obviously, they need to afford Daniel Jones. Nick Cross is a free agent. There's guys out there that they're going to want to bring back. And then guys who maybe we're all not sold on, but they have opinions on, Kwity Paye, Braden Smith. There's guys out there that they want to have money for. And again, going back to the Carly Ursay-Gordon press conference, the urgency and the pressure on Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard internally has never been more than right now. And when the owner comes out and actually declares that, I think it's pretty serious. So the pressure to make things happen and not just be stagnant through the offseason, it's there. And so you kind of, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to have 45 mil or something in cap space right now. They have a decent amount, but there's 2 ways to look at this. You need to create more because you need to find upgrades everywhere you can, but you also have to finally just kind of do away with the contracts where the money far outweighs the production. At the time the Colts signed Pittman a few years back to this deal, it was a good deal. And it became an even better deal 24 hours later when several other receivers signed for even steeper money. So at the time, it was a great deal. It's not like the Colts, it was bad, the whole time they did this. But his production has declined. He did have the back injury 2 years ago. This year, being relatively healthy, he still wasn't super productive. He's been bypassed as the dude on the depth chart by Alec Pierce. Like you mentioned, Pierce is
Tyler Warren, honestly, maybe
by Warren. And they even try to get Josh Downs involved a lot in those money downs as well. It hasn't always worked. This wasn't Downs' best year either. But Pittman used to dominate the target share. And that just has not been the case anymore. Jonathan Taylor's catching more balls. Tyler Warren is the real tight end they've had there since Jack Doyle. Downs is a guy they like. Pierce is someone they want to desperately get the ball to spark the offense. So making the 7th most money among all NFL wide receivers when you're so far down the totem pole in terms of actual production, it doesn't match. And traditionally, the Colts have let these contracts play out because they want to honor the player, and they want the player to honor the contract and not come back for all these renegotiations and everything. So they're going to do their part to honor the contract that they put out there. But that's just not what successful teams do. You know what I mean? Like, you have to revisit things. And this isn't them outright saying you need to cut him or anything like that, but you got to figure something out. And that might result in him being cut. But $29 million for a player who's never reached 10 touchdowns. He's not routinely getting 1,000 yards or like 100 catches. I thought last Sunday was just like a really sad period to it. A little, just a punctuation mark to this whole discussion. Again, not to necessarily say you have to cut him, but there was a couple plays where they really needed him to step up and he dropped the ball. And then that's not the first time this year that's been the case. So that's with the money on the line. Again, $29 million. To me, that is the most obvious discussion that needs to be had about the current contracts on the roster.
Yeah, and just to add more kind of clarity to the Colts cap situation, they do have $45 million in projected cap space. Most of that's going to go to Daniel Jones, and then whatever's left over, they're going to have to make room for Alec Pierce. So when you have the ability, whether the Colts, again, $29 million is what Pittman's projected to make. If you move his contract in a trade or cutting him, you free up $24 million. You only incur $5 million in dead cap. So I'm actually going to go one step further here, Jake, and I want to see your response to it. I think the trade needs to happen this offseason. I really think the trade needs to happen. I don't think his role is irreplaceable as what it was with Frank Reich, where I think in Shane Steichen's offense, Pittman has always kind of just been a very limited route tree guy who runs these underneath kind of timing routes. And yeah, he can create some hidden yardage after the catch, and he's still a quality player, but I don't even think he's being maximized in this offense. I just don't think the fit has ever been perfect. I don't think he's as well-rounded as a receiver as what the Colts need there at that spot. So I think ultimately trading that to another team, having another team take on 1 year at $24 million, get that guy they can sell to their fan base as the number one wide receiver, especially if your team's like New England or Vegas, who have like $150 million in cap space. You can fit him in that contract for 1 year. Just dump a 5th or a 6th round pick to the Colts for him, and there we go. The Colts free up the space. They get some draft capital. I think it makes the most sense, because if they come out and extend him or restructure it, you're just pushing the bill to the future. You still have to pay that bill at some point, and he's still a player that's not really meeting the criteria that you want for that kind of money. So I think for the Colts, it's a tough decision, and I think this will be the biggest litmus test for if Chris Ballard's going to take this offseason seriously, because if we see him do what he did with Ebukam, where he doesn't touch that contract, or it's just an extension on there, then I'm convinced he's not fully changing and he's not doing what he needs to be done for this team. I love Michael Pittman Jr. I think he's a fantastic player. I think fans should have his jersey. I think, he's a guy that has warranted the love over the years, but there's always a time to move on. And you want to be the team that moves on from a player at the right time rather than 1 year too late. And that was always like the Patriots model when they were winning Super Bowls, was they move on from players at the right time, not 1 year too late. You can get some value out of them, and you know when to make that move. For the Colts, they have a big time out in that contract. I just think trading him away makes the most sense for both sides at some point this offseason.
Yeah, and for us to even put this out there, it has to make sense, and there has to be suitors, and I think there are. Like you mentioned, Vegas is one of them. I look at Seattle, if they need someone to replace like the Cooper Kupp role, if Baltimore needs to replace DeAndre Hopkins, Cleveland has extra ammo, they need receivers. Like, there are teams out there that make a lot of sense. And Pittman's not bad. He's not washed. He's just like, the Colts need an upgrade. They need more firepower. This offense, we clearly see what direction they want to go with it, and the money is just not matching the production. But Pittman can represent a large upgrade for a lot of teams, I really feel. And so I think the supply and the demand both is there. And for the Colts, they've got to have the motivation to move on from that money. And like you mentioned, Chris Ballard is the big hang up here, because he admittedly gets very emotional and tied into these players, their families, their lives. This feels so cold for me saying it, but like if I'm a GM, you have to realize like you don't look at players like as numbers or whatever, but like it is a business and you have to make tough decisions. And you can't just stare at these guys and see like their families or their home lives or things like that, because you're never going to be able to make tough decisions. Like a lot of these guys always will have some sort of touching story or reason not to do something.
Yeah.
It's again, like you said, we're going to see if Chris Ballard is serious or not about changing his stripes. Last year was a great start with being more aggressive, but this year, I think, again, I keep saying it, you got to hurt some feelings this year. That's just the nature of the business.
Yeah, last year was a good start with how he spent in free agency. Again, I don't need you to spend big like that in every free agency, but
Right.
I like the aggressiveness. I still had issues with how he handled some of the contracts on the roster, including the Ebucom one. But we'll see. They have a big opportunity with Michael Pittman Jr. contract. Also, I think it's a big opportunity to shake up a leadership core that has been here the last 5 seasons when they haven't made the playoffs. And speaking of that leadership core, there's another big contract that I think the Colts can look to move this offseason. I'm sure a lot of Colts fans will be on board with somehow moving this contract.
Finding a doctor that you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You want someone in network nearby with availability, but you also want a doctor who really listens, makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and helps you walk out feeling confident about your next step. Your diamond in the rough doctor exists, and finding them is easy with Zocdoc. Zocdoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so that you can choose someone who truly connects with you. I love that you could search for specialties or symptoms even, and you can quickly find the right fit for you. Being able to choose in-person or video visits makes scheduling way easier. The video visits is so clutch nowadays because you don't always need to go in for something, or you don't want to expose people to what you got going on. So the video visits, that's really valuable nowadays. You can even check the verified patient reviews to get a real sense of a doctor's vibe and their communication style. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor that you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message.
And hey guys, the draft pick positions are set and so many teams are looking for their franchise QB. Ever wish that you could become a pro QB getting drafted first overall by the Colts? I mean, they don't have a first round pick in the next couple of years, but in this hypothetical, well, now you can. There's a mobile game for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a #1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your franchise to greatness, to help them turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the #1 QB career mode game on mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. You can sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry and evolve your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks, become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a game or two while you're on the go. So just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com. Or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDON in all caps in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. That's Ultimate QB Football Legend QB1. It's your legacy. All right, Locked On Colts every day. I want to thank you guys real quick for making Locked On Colts your first listen of the day and every single day. And thank you for making Locked On Colts the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer clubs. You can catch our audio ad-free and get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of our shows. Go to LockedOnColts.supercast.com to join or even gift a subscription. Now, Jake, there might be some people who disagree with our first segment. There's sentimentality when it comes to Michael Pittman Jr. He's still been a pretty good player. The fans don't hear him too much during the season, so I think for the most part, he's still in a lot of fans' good graces. And quite frankly, we all love Michael Pittman Jr. This is
Yeah.
purely a business discussion. It gets a little bit emotional when we talk about this next player, and that is public enemy number one, Zaire Franklin. Now, public sentiment was so good about him until 2024 when the podcast started for him. Us talking about another podcast where it's very meta here, by the way. But fans have really turned on Zaire Franklin in the last 2 years. And quite frankly, like the PFF numbers and a lot of the advanced numbers were just brutal on him this year. I think by PFF, he was like their third worst linebacker in the NFL this season.
I could see it. I've got some of his PFF stuff.
Okay,
right
so
here,
you'll read them
actually.
off here in a second, but he's got 2 years left on his contract, $0 guaranteed, $18.5 million over the next 2 years. You save a little less than $15 million over the next 2 seasons with releasing or trading him, and that's included in just under $6 million this year. I want to stipulate this. I don't think that you would trade him. I think a similar caliber player was like Jermaine Pratt. The Bengals couldn't trade him, and they ended up cutting him. I think this would be more of a cut situation. But, Jay, give us the reasons why we should cut Zaire Franklin, because you have the PFF numbers right there, and I think PFF would be all on board with cutting him with the grades they gave him this year.
Yeah, I want to preface it with saying, like, obviously we're not just going off PFF grades as to why we would do this. Like, we have eyes and we've seen every snap that he's played. But it's just, I think you need so much more out of this linebacker group. And we said it before the year. They downplayed it because they thought they had what they needed. And you saw just glaring opportunities for guys to make plays in the middle of the field that weren't this year. So let's just look at the PFF of it all here. I do think in general they get things close. Like, some details can be pretty questionable, but like if a player had a bad season, it usually reflects that. If they had a good
Come
season,
on,
it
stop
usually
giving us the
reflects that.
stipulations. Get into the
Well,
numbers.
everyone hates people that go strictly off PFF. So
But they love when it's against their public enemy.
That's
they
true.
want to hear it. So let's
That's
hear the numbers. Let's hear the numbers.
All right, so this was comfortably his worst career grade this year, 38.4. That's worse than bad. That's awful.
Yeah.
He also had career worsts in run defense, which was a 54.9 grade, coverage, which is 29.9 grade. Run defense and coverage is mainly what you're asked to do as a linebacker. Tackling, his worst grade, 47.3. You've always got to tackle as a linebacker. He had his worst missed tackle rate of his career at 13.9% this year, and his fewest amount of stops this year with 39. And that's all numbers like since he became a full-time starter, obviously. Right. So yeah, like this was by PFF's measure his worst career year as a starter. And that checks out with him being in a new system with Lou Anarumo. And you and I said probably midway through the year when we kind of did a check-in with guys that like not disappointing, but we want to see more from. Zaire was loading the stat sheet the year prior. He was making plays all over the field, creating turnovers at a great rate. He did like almost none of that this year. He got his 100+ tackles, got a handful of tackles for loss, a few sacks, and that was about it. And that just wasn't good enough. You know, he was out of position a lot. He was missing tackles. Again, evidenced by his highest missed tackle rate of his career. It just wasn't good enough. And then we talked a lot about Jermaine Pratt in the offseason, and we said, I don't know, that's just having two Zaire Franklins. Well, they did wind up with two Zaire Franklins all year, and one of them was better than the other, and that was Jermaine Pratt. So what do you do with that? That's a much cheaper player who is also a free agent this year. And, you know, you save, obviously, you get about $5 million or so from cutting ties with that Zaire contract. That might be time.
Yeah, I still want to stand by that. I don't think Franklin is as bad as the perception or even as bad as what those numbers would suggest. But I will say this was his worst year of his career by far as a starter. A lot of it had to do with being in a different system, but also just not creating turnovers. That's what he was so big at last year. It was creating the turn. Like for every negative Franklin play, there was a punch out, you know, or there was a big fumble recovery. There was a big sack. There was a big interception. And it's like, okay, you can live with the ups and downs if you're getting turnovers. If you're not creating turnovers and you have the ups and downs and probably more downs than ups, then this is what's going to happen. So yeah, I think the Colts can make a statement by cutting him. Again, I don't think he's some horrible player like some people think, but it's another chance to shake up this leadership committee, and especially with a player who's getting paid a little bit too much for a system that he doesn't really fit. You want to play more man coverage. You want to be this faster, flying around defense that is really smart and heady. Franklin more so fits that Tampa 2, that cover 3 type of zone style of defense. The Colts ran a ton of man this year, and having a player like Franklin, it limits you to where if he's on the field when you want to play man, you're basically blitzing him or you're leaving yourself vulnerable to him getting beat in coverage. So I think if you really want to commit to this system, which the Colts, they did a lot of roster churning on the defense throughout the year to bring in guys who fit this system better. I think this is one contract you probably want to move off of. So I don't think it's as egregious as Pittman or even as Ebukam the offseason before, which I'll never stop talking about. But I do think it's one that you really need to look at if you're the Colts. And especially when like Jermaine Pratt came in here and he was just so much better than Franklin. And like he's still limited, but don't get me wrong, like Pratt is very limited, but he looked so much better in the system. He just looked faster. He looked more impactful, fewer downs as well in terms of like the ups and downs. He just didn't have as many bad moments. Like if the option was, hey, I can cut Franklin and use that money I'm saving from cutting him to re-sign Jermaine Pratt, I think that's a no-brainer because I'd rather have Pratt than Franklin right now going forward.
Yeah, if I were them, I would go out and find a linebacker or two that specialized in coverage and was, above average at identifying run versus pass. Because, like, look at what happened. Like, the middle of the field for the Colts, especially on in-breaking, cross stuff, like all that was a nightmare all year. It never got better. And, like, if they're gonna be running it back with Lou Anarumo, I mean, he might get hired as a head coach somewhere. He's got a couple interviews at least. But like if they're running it back with Lou Anarumo, they have got to get real about the linebacker position and who actually fits the defense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you got to have not this like half overhaul like they had this past offseason, right? Where we got Ward in, we got Bynum, but we still want you to have my guys in Franklin and Jalen Jones and Juju Brents was on the roster going, like, I still need my guys in there. These guys don't fit. We need to overhaul this system for it to work. So I'm curious to see how much of that change really happens. But coming up, guys, there are some other big contracts on the books for the Colts, a couple other notable roster decisions. We're going to look at a couple other contracts that the Colts could look to move or depart with in this offseason.
Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to the Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back, everydayers. We are creating opportunities for the Colts to save more money because they have millions and billions of dollars to work with that Zach and I don't. So we are spending other people's money, but we're also getting them more money. So we talked about how Michael Pittman Jr. and Zaire Franklin are two glaring opportunities for them to create money, shed salary cap where the production doesn't really fit the value. And then we've got a handful of more opportunities here. And there's a lot of context to each of these. So two guys with serious injuries to end the season, DeForest Buckner and Mooney Ward. So Mooney Ward already told us to our faces on Monday he's not sure if he's retiring or not. So like that's very much in the air. He had an Instagram post that even furthered that made it seem like he's got a foot out the door. And a lot of the times with these guys, if they're considering retirement that much, they're usually done. I'm not going to make a decision for him, though. He could change his mind. It's maybe just how he's feeling now. But he did say if he gets like one more concussion, he's probably going to retire.
So just call it there, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with Mooney Ward, you got a $20.2 million cap hit next year. You can let him make his decision, or you can make your decision and say, hey, we got this guy who we're paying $20 million a year. We need you bought in or bought out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I respect him, whatever he chooses. I don't think he's pulling a fast one on anyone. This is just a crappy situation that no one could foresee coming. Another guy who the Colts were really relying on this year, and the injuries have really started to take a toll in these last 2 years. Now 3 stints on IR in the last 2 years. DeForest Buckner, he's got the second highest cap hit, $26.6 million. Now that's not a guy you cut. You do not cut DeForest Buckner. That's a guy who's he's royalty in the building. You kind of let him do what he wants. But do you work with the money a little bit? Like what happens? But at the same time, that neck injury, 2 of them, like with it, like re-aggravating that neck injury, that's serious business right there.
Yeah.
So DeForest Buckner, I mean, you don't really know what that looks like next year either.
Yeah, I will be upfront. Like, I'm not the best cap expert. From my understanding, though, with those 2 contracts, there's not really any way to make up that money for the Colts unless they go hard after the signing bonuses that are already paid out to these players. So say both of them do retire this offseason, which I think is a real possibility with these 2 guys, the Colts really can't recoup much money. Like, they're going to be on the books. Like, I think they would save like $5 to $6 million at best. Now they could post June 1st that and spread out the money between this year and next year, but then you add problems for next year's cap. So there's not really much you can save with those contracts. Those are just ones that you have to be aware of, I guess, going forward. There's really nothing you can do with those 2 contracts. So whatever decision they make, if they decide to come back, you might as well keep them because no one's trading for them, and you can't really cut them because there's no money to be gained. But if they retire, you still kind of are on the book for that money. I will say one more contract that the Colts are almost certainly going to touch this offseason because it just makes the most sense. They'll extend Quentin Nelson at some point this offseason and free up a lot of cap space by doing that. We don't have that in our notes here, Jake, but Quentin Nelson's going into last year of his contract. You extend him and you can free up a ton of cap space with the signing bonus and stuff there. So those are like the big money ones on there. Quentin Nelson, once he gets his extension, will free up a good $15 to $20 million for the Colts as well. So that's another way to free it up. But I think when we're looking at guys that they can realistically like touch the money or kind of move the contracts, the big 3 after all the guys we've talked about are Grover Stewart, Kenny Moore, and Anthony Richardson. I'm going to be straight up right here. Anthony Richardson's not coming back to the Colts in any capacity next year. The Colts, I think I think when they make that trade and get him to another team, I think the Colts would save around $5 million against the cap with that one. So I think that one's already said and done. It's just when it's going to happen and how much they get for him. Hopefully they can get like a 5th, but we'll see with that one. Kenny Moore, they don't really save a ton with his if they were to cut him because of that restructure they did in the middle of the season. So I think he'll probably be back, but I think there are good questions to be had about his fit in this system and how much he struggled in man coverage this year. And then the most interesting one, I think, is Grover Stewart, because they have such an out in his contract where I think they could cut him and save $12 million versus only $2 million in dead cap. And if you can reallocate that to a $12 million edge rusher, that might be more worthwhile for your team. But on the other hand, Grover Stewart's really good. He probably had his most impactful season to date, had multiple turnovers forced from the nose tackle position this year. Like, honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to like a 2-year extension from him, and then you can just push some of the money to the future. I know everyone wants that firm reset, but Grover Stewart is always going to be an asset to any team, regardless of rebuilding or not. But I think those are interesting contracts to look at from the Colts' perspective. I don't know if they touch those ones. I don't think those are as pressing to really touch than the Pittman and Zaire Franklin, then obviously the Quentin Nelson extension that we'll get. But I think those are certainly on the table for being like a discussion. I mean, Richardson's going to get moved at some point, but the other 2 I think are interesting for this conversation.
Yeah, and this comment here asks, they make the point that Anthony's on a rookie deal, so how much really could he be making? Well, he's got a $10.8 million hit.
Yeah, he's on a top 5 pick rookie deal. So he's
so
making
that's a little
yeah.
different.
Yeah, and there is incentive for a team to trade for him, because if he comes in, they like what they see from him, then they can pick up the 5th-year option and do what they want from there. So there is an incentive for a team to trade for that contract for sure. Somebody will take it, because at 10.8, that's not that expensive for a backup quarterback. And heck, if you start him, then that's really not expensive for a starting quarterback. So somebody will trade for Richardson. He won't be on the Colts this next season at all, though.
Yeah. All right, guys. So if last year was the off season of actually signing significant free agents, we think this off season ought to be the one of shedding, dead weight on salary cap space. Yeah. And this is the year. They talked about complacency and bringing in new blood and competition and stuff last year. That's got to continue every year. That cannot be something that's just a one-time thing. Look what the Eagles do. The Eagles hurt feelings constantly. They get rid of guys they win Super Bowls with and who have deep roots there. Winning teams don't care, and they just go ahead and do it. And I think that's what the Colts have got to do this year. There is money on the line, and you got to pay to play. And this team, you have to try by any means necessary to get where you want to go and get this thing turned around. Having more money is certainly a way to start that.
Yeah, and then pure prediction here for me with all these things that we talked about, I will say Pittman traded, Franklin, that's going to be the toughest projection here. If they're serious this offseason, they cut that contract. We'll see if they actually are, but I think they should cut that contract. Mooney, probably a retirement, and maybe you spread that out, but you just deal with that. And then Grover, I don't think they touch that contract. If they do, it would be an extension. Quentin Nelson, I think, will be an extension. And Anthony, I believe they will trade off of that contract. And I think that'll be the big moves they make to create some cap space. Now, from there, it's about signing Alec Pierce, signing Daniel Jones, maybe like a Jermaine Pratt, Neville Gallimore, getting those guys back as well, and then doing anything you can to get the edge rush room better, because I think that's going to be the number one priority for this team this offseason is fixing the edge rush room. They only have 2 guys coming back currently under contract in Leatu Latu and JT Tuimoloau. So they're going to need more edge rush bodies in here, and I hope they're not re-signing the guys they just had. So they're going to need more guys there, and then maybe some linebacker stuff after that. But that's all we have for today, guys. We'll have more conversations about all this offseason stuff in the future. We want to say thank you, though, for tuning in today and every day to Locked On Colts. We'll be back tomorrow to continue breaking down this offseason. So make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Colts so you get all the latest episodes. If you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2. All on social media. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Colts ad-free, plus members only Discord access and more. Head to lockedoncolts.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we're going to direct you over to the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL Podcast as your next listen. Thank you guys again for joining today's episode, and we'll check you out back here again tomorrow afternoon.